Hi there, Richard Fulmer here, and welcome to another Richard's Rock Rambles. Today we're going to look at a great British blues rock band by the name of Bad Company. So Bad Company started in the early 70s. Their first album came out in 74. They were kind of like a super group. Two of the guys came from the great British blues band called Free, that being Paul Rodgers on vocals, some guitar as well as harmonica, and Simon Kirke on drums. We then also had Mick Rolfs on guitar. Mick Rolfs had been with Mott the Hoople, Ian Hunter's band. And on bass, there was a guy by the name of Boz Burrell, and he had been with the band King Crimson. So it was quite a change for him from that sort of involved prog rock scene into the blues rock scene, which was a lot more song-based and a lot simpler sort of, the drumming side of things and what have you. But he still fitted in pretty well with his fretless bass. So they formed in 1973, and that was the original lineup that I've just mentioned. There would be later on lineup changes, different people coming in and leaving, but I think that was the sort of classic Bad Company lineup and the one that everybody grew to love. They were initially signed to Led Zeppelin's label Swan Song, and had as their manager the larger-than-life Peter Grant. Good manager to have. Nobody gave you much stick when he was your manager. He made sure that you got what was due to you. So that was a great start for the band. And they would become massive in the mid-70s, early to mid-70s, 74 onwards. Unfortunately, as with most big bands, things would get out of hand with the money, and of course the drugs would come in and the booze would come in, and things would start to fracture, and then you'd have lineup changes and what have you. Nonetheless, a great band, and what I liked about Bad Company was their songwriting. I mean, they could rock out with the best of them, but I think if you have your songwriting down, it's half the battle won, and these guys all contributed to that. They were blessed in Paul Rodgers with one of the best vocals in rock history. I mean, his voice today is still amazing. He's still got it. He's one of the few sort of classic rock singers that can still cut it to this day. Simon Kirke is still around. Still around. Mick Rolfs as well, although I think he's been having a few health issues of late. Boz Burrell unfortunately passed away some time back. I think he'd also had his demons with booze and drugs, and his health wasn't that great, and sadly he passed away. Like I mentioned, there were other lineups. So initially the labels that they were signed to was Island, and then Swan Song, the Led Zeppelin label. The most recent lineup is Paul Rodgers, vocals, piano, guitar. He's quite an accomplished muso as well as a good singer. Simon Kirke, drums and vocals. He's also got a good voice. Howard Leese on guitar and backing vocals. Howard Leese for quite a while had been a guitarist for the band Heart. And Todd Ronning is the bassist at the moment, and he also does bass and backing vocals. There was another lineup fronted by a guy by the name of Brian Howe, who I think sang for Ted Nugent at one stage. I don't have any of those albums. I did have many years ago, I think, on vinyl. Very different sounding Bad Company, more in the line of a Foreigner, that kind of sound. Very commercial, obviously trying to attract a different market. Whereas the early stuff was more sort of blues-based hard rock. And they did, I think, 4 albums. Fame and Fortune from 1986, Dangerous Age 1988, and Holy Water from 1990, and Here Comes Trouble from 1992. That was the Brian Howe era. It wasn't bad stuff, but for me, if you want to get into Bad Company and you haven't heard them before, I would definitely go with the early stuff. So let's just run through with what I have here. I can show you. Starting off with their debut album, simply entitled Bad Company. I'm sure most people recognize that album. This was a great album, a classic album, and there were so many hits came off here. Can't Get Enough, good rock song. It starts off with some great guitar from Mick Rolfs. Rock Steady, another hit. Ready for Love. Almost all the tracks on this album were hits. Don't Let Me Down is sort of a slower tempo, still a great song. Bad Company, the title track, which is another epic song of theirs, starts off with that piano with Paul Rodgers at the piano. Quite an accomplished pianist, actually. The Way I Choose, Moving On, and Seagull, that sort of slow ballad type song, which is really great as well. That also became a hit. This was produced by the band, and here's a picture of the band. That's Simon Kirk, Mick Rolfs, Paul Rodgers in the middle, and there's Boz Burrell. A great lineup. And they all complemented each other very well for the first time. As far as debuts go, this is a great debut. And they followed that up with an equally good album called Straight Shooter. And on here they had Good Loving Gone Bad. That was also a big hit. Feel Like Making Love, which was the biggest hit off here. Great rocker. Weep No More, Shooting Star, which is a song pretty much about drug scenes and what happens to you if you have too much of that. Deal with the Preacher, Wildfire Woman, Anna, and Call on Me. Excellent album as well. These first two have been remastered recently with bonus discs and what have you. I don't have those, but I have heard them and they've done a really good job with those. And it's not just bonus tracks for the sake of having bonus tracks. What they've done is they've given you original mixes, outtakes and what have you, which is really interesting to see how songs are created, you know, from the infancy up into when they get recorded. And some of the throwaway stuff for me is as good as what actually landed up on the eventual album. So I want to see if there's anything I can show you. No, this is not the remaster, so there's not much to show. Excellent album as well, Straight Shooter. Then we move on to an album called Run with a Pack. Not the best cover in the world, I think. It could have done a bit more than that. Live for the Music is a great intro song. Starts off with a guitar that sort of slides in, and then Simon Kirk comes in on the drums. Simple Man, Honey Child, which is a good track. Love Me Somebody. Run with a Pack, the title track's good. Silver, Blue and Gold, which has got more of a sort of a country feel, which would eventually land up in some of their later albums, more of a country kind of style. They were obviously trying for something different. Young Blood, which is quite a fun song. Do Right by Your Woman, Sweet Little Sister, and Fade Away. Still produced by Bad Company. Also, not a bad album. Not much to show you in there either. I really need to get those remasters because they got some fantastic shots in there as well. Then we move on to another favorite of mine, Burning Sky, which is a slightly different Bad Company sound. This is almost more of a atmospheric, even bits of Floyd in there, some parts, bit of jazz. So they were obviously, you know, looking for different ideas. But I think what happened was they lost their core fan base because they strayed too far away from the original sound, in my opinion. Burning Sky, which starts off with that thunder and lightning intro, that's quite an interesting track, very sort of offbeat to that track, very different. Morning Sun, Leaving You, Like Water, Knapsack, which is a sort of a throwaway kind of song, Everything I Need, Heartbeat, and the weirdest track on here is the last one called Master of Ceremony, which is a sort of a take on society and the whole black and white thing, and it's a very jerky kind of song, you know. It's not an easy listen, but it's still a good track, and that's about 7 minutes long. It's the longest track on the album. Burning Sky. Obviously they were trying for different things. Then we move on to Desolation Angels. Not one of my favorites, but it has its moments. Still a good album. Rock and Roll Fantasy was the big hit off here. That's about 3 minutes long. Crazy Circles, Gone, 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 Early in the Morning, Oh Atlanta, which has got a definite country feel. You can see what they were doing here. Rhythm Machine, She Brings Me Love. It's okay. You know, definitely not as good as the first two. So that's Desolation Angels. Then the only Bad Company I still have on vinyl is the album called Ruff Diamonds, which would be the last one to feature Paul Rodgers. He was just, I think he'd had enough of the band at that stage with the drug scene, and he could see if he carried on, he was just going to get burnt out. So he left, and then he formed a band with Jimmy Page called The Firm. They did 2 albums, not very long, Of course, he also did a stint with Queen and his great solo career as well. So this album isn't that great. It's very patchy. There's not much to write about. Not memorable songs on here. Electric Land is okay. Untie the Knot. Nothing on the TV. Ballad of the Band. Cross Country Boy. Old Mexico. Yeah. This came out in '82. So they were also trying to compete with the music scene that was changing. You know, a lot of synths were coming into music, and I think they just lost their way with this one. So Paul Rodgers left the band, and then they went into the Brian Howe era, which I told you about earlier. I don't have any of their stuff. Later on, in fact, this was in the 90s, 1995, they came back with a new lineup and an album called Company of Strangers. And this featured a guy by the name of Robert Hart on vocals. That's him over there. He had, for me, the closest sounding to Paul Rodgers in his voice. Great singer, and it's not a bad album actually. There's a shot of the band over there. So who else was in here? Rick Wills was on bass. I think he was a one-time bassist for Foreigner as well. Mick Ralphs was still on guitars. Dave Bucket Colwell on guitars as well, so you had a double guitar, which in the original lineup was not, it was just a single, and Simon Kirk still on drums. So I think in all these lineups, the only guy from the original band who's stuck it out has been Simon Kirk on drums. It's not a bad album, well produced. Company of Strangers, the title track is good. Clearwater Highway, Judas My Brother, Gimme Gimme, Where I Belong. It's worth checking out. I think this is still around. Then there's some live stuff as well. This one came out 2011, live at Wembley. This is quite a good album actually. Can't Get Enough, Honey Child, Run With The Pack, Young Blood, Seagull, Shooting Star, Rock and Roll Fantasy. All the big hits are on here. Well recorded. Let's see if there's anything. There's a couple of shots of the guys live. Paul Rodgers with his hair, receding hairline. I think he had a hair transplant shortly after this. There's another shot with him with his vest. Very fit guy. And as I said, his voice is still strong today as it was back in the 70s. Not many of those guys can still do what he does. Then there's another live at Wembley. This I got from a friend of mine in the UK. And it's just Bad Company live in the UK. And this is an instant CD production. So what happens is, straight after the concert, you leave the concert and you get the CD that you've just watched. The concert that you've just watched, they burn it on a CD. The only downside with this is the quality is not that great. Obviously, there's not much mixing done. It's sort of straight off the desk. And there's your album. It's a 3-disc set. But there's not a single thing in here about the songs. There's no booklet. There's no, it's very basic. So if you want to get the song titles and what have you, you have to go online. There's a link in the back of the CD at the bottom that tells you about it. I suppose it's just a nice thing to have if you were there at the concert. And I was quite happy to get this. I didn't pay a cent, so hey, it's free. Then there's another one called Bad Company in Concert, Merchants of Cool. This is also a really great concert. This came out on DVD as well. Another lineup, Jazz Lockery on bass. Paul Rodgers on vocals, Simon Kirk on drums, and Dave Caldwell on guitar. He was on that Company of Strangers album. Burning Sky, Can't Get Enough, Feel Like Making Love, Moving On, Deal With the Preacher, All Right Now, so they do some free stuff as well. Shooting Star. It's not a bad album actually. The DVD is pretty good too. There's a picture of the guys there. There's a great live shot. Excellent live band, and when you've got a front man like Paul Rodgers, you can't go wrong. And Simon Kirk is a rock solid drummer as well. Then there was a best of that came out, I think this was in the 90s, 1999 in fact. Best of Bad Company, and at that stage this featured some new tracks, Hammer of Love, Hey Hey, Ain't It Good, and Tracking Down a Highway. So there were 4 new tracks. Quite a bit of history of the band inside in the booklets. There's a great shot of the guys. All sorts of interesting stuff. I don't know if you can see that, but they used to play to massive crowds in the 70s. Anything as big a crowd as Led Zeppelin had at that time. These guys were pretty big in the States. And they even give you the whole history of Bad Company there and a sort of family tree. Really interesting collection to get. And then there's a documentary called The Band, the Music, the Story, Bad Company, the official authorized 40th anniversary documentary. This also comes in a long box. I've just got this came I think with Classic Rock. This is one of Classic Rock's special editions. Also really interesting. Let's see, there's some shots. There's the late Boz Burrell, brilliant bassist. You can hear he had prog rock roots, and shots of the guys live and there. Really interesting documentary, great interviews with the band, other people that toured with the band, managers and what have you. The ins and outs. I've seen a few Bad Company documentaries, and this is, I think, probably the best. So there we go, Bad Company, one of the great British rock bands. Blues rock bands, they did hard rock, you could put them in a few categories. And a band well worth checking out. As I said, Paul Rodgers still going today, doing his thing. Simon Kirk's still around. I'm not sure what Mick Rolfes is up to, if he's actually recording anymore. So hopefully there'll be another lineup change at some stage with Simon Kirk and Paul Rodgers still in the front, and whoever else. I think Howard Leese might still be there. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Please, guys, if you'd like, subscribe down below. Any comments will be great. And next time we're going to check out a band who fall in the blues rock category, but they could also be in metal, hard rock, boogie rock. We're going to do the great Australian band, AC/DC. I'll see you next time. Ciao.